Welcome to Saturday Morning Classics. This week we are reading Part 2 of Manitou Blood by Graham Masterton. So sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and enjoy the story. Chapter 3, Bloodroot. I looked up from the cards with the most serious frown that I could manage. It was pretty hard to be serious when the 67-year-old woman sitting opposite me was wearing a bright pink straw hat covered in china cherries and a multi-layered pink organza dress that looked as if she were all dressed up for a children's birthday party, and pink knee-high socks, and two-toned cheerleader shoes, custom-made, also in pink. "You have a weekend of very heavy financial losses ahead of you," I told her. "By Monday, you're going to be $17,480 poorer, with nothing to show for it." Mrs. Teitelbaum gnawed at her lip. She didn't say anything, but I could tell by the haunted look in her eyes and the way she was clutching the strap of her purse how anxious she was. Mrs. Teitelbaum's money was dearer to her heart than her grandchildren. If there was any legal way that she could have married her deposit account at Chemical Bank, she would have done it, and she would have taken it on a honeymoon to Jamaica, too. "Tomorrow, let's see. Tomorrow you're going to drop your purse." "You're sure? That's terrible." "Oh, it's worse than that. Your purse is going to be picked up." "Picked up? Surely that's good." "Not if the person who picks it up is a manic depressive who uses your credit card to buy 300 challah loaves from Eli Zabar's." "No." "Oh, that's not all by a long shot. Friday, your late husband's portrait is going to fall off the wall and break one of Whittley's hind legs, which costs you more than $800 in veterinary bills." "I can't bear it." "It gets worse, believe me. Saturday, a distant relative is going to call and ask you to make bail for a trumped-up charge of insurance fraud, which, out of the goodness of your heart, you do, especially since he offers you his Mercedes as security. Unfortunately, he disappears, and you never hear from him again, and it turns out that his Mercedes has already been repossessed. Sunday, while you're out having lunch with your friend, Mariah, Mr. Polanski upstairs leaves the water running in his bathroom. Your apartment is flooded, and all of your Persian rugs are ruined. While you're clearing up the mess, somebody sneaks into your bedroom and steals your best pearls." Mrs. Teitelbaum leaned forward and peered through her gold-rimmed spectacles. "This is what it says in my cards? For real?" "There, look," I told her. "The smiling fool with armfuls of bread. The man in prison with his horse and carriage being taken away. The rainstorm with the drowning woman underneath. And the beachcomber stealing pearls from the oysters. It's all there, Mrs. Teitelbaum, as clear as the nose on your face." Mrs. Teitelbaum prodded her nose as if it were somehow to blame for what was going to happen to her. "So how do you know 17,000 and what's it so exact?" "Mrs. Teitelbaum, that's what you pay me for, my psychic numeracy. I count the number of cards and multiply them by the number of times you've come here to ask my advice, plus Mr. Teitelbaum's age when he passed away, which was 76, and the 12 tribes of Israel, that's 12. Then I deduct your age and the last 2 digits of your cell phone number, and that's the exact figure." 17,000 and what? 17,480. "So what can I do?" "I don't think there's anything you can do. Fate is fate. Destiny is destiny. The cards don't make the future. They only warn you what to expect. I pushed back my chair and stood up, accidentally stepping on the hem of my dark green robe and tearing the stitches. At least none of this will come as a shock, will it? I mean, you'll be well prepared for it. Mrs. Teitelbaum's cherries rattled. But I don't want to lose all this money. This is the reason I come to see you, Mr. Erskine. I come here to find out what is going to happen to me so that it won't. I went to the window and parted the dusty brown velvet drapes with 2 fingers. Down below, on 17th Street, a young Hispanic woman was leaning over her stroller, wiping ice cream from her toddler's mouth. She had masses of black curly hair, and she was wearing a tight yellow top and a small pair of white cotton shorts. I let the drapes fall back. There is something you can do, Mrs. Teitelbaum. If you really want to change your weekend, you could try a little something from the magic pantry. The magic pantry? I don't often recommend that my clients should resort to spells, Mrs. Teitelbaum. I'm not saying that they don't work. Oh boy, do they work. There's no denying that they work. But they're not cheap, and they can have unpredictable side effects. Well, I certainly don't want to lose $17,000, Mr. Erskine, whatever the side effects. I went to the glass-fronted cabinet at the far end of the room and made a performance of producing a key on the end of a very long chain. I unlocked the doors, which actually wasn't too difficult because the lock had been missing when I bought it. Then I reached inside and brought out a green glass jar with a tarnished brass lid. I opened it and let Mrs. Teitelbaum smell it. Herbie, she decided, what is it? Spikenard. If you put a few leaves in a bag and keep the bag under your pillow, all of your possessions will remain safe, at least for as long as the spikenard stays fresh. Well, that sounds ideal. It does, doesn't it? But there is a very dramatic side effect, I'm afraid. What's that? Spikenard will also make you irresistible to younger men. If you sleep on a bag of spikenard every night, well, the chances are that you'll soon find yourself a vigorous young lover, at least half your age. He'll have, well, let's not get too descriptive about it, but you won't be disappointed. Mrs. Teitelbaum's left eyelid started to twitch. This really works? Of course. Spikenard is one of the most powerful herbs in the magic pantry, definitely not to be sneezed at. Well, if it will protect my money, maybe I'll take some. How much is it? $250 for 3 leaves, I'm afraid. Well, if it saves me $17,000, that's nothing. As for the side effect, well, I guess I can live with the side effect. I picked out 3 leaves, but then I hesitated. I just thought of a problem. Problem? What problem? Well, spikenard will keep your money safe, and you'll get your young stud. But when you've grown tired of him, you won't be able to get rid of him. Ever. Never? Nope. Not so long as you're sleeping with spikenard under your pillow. If you want him to go, you'll have to throw away the spikenard. But that means that you'll lose your money, too. It's a question of losing it later rather than sooner. Mrs. Teitelbaum poked her nose into the jar and took a deep, appreciative sniff. For a few seconds, I could see that she was very close to deciding that $17,480 wasn't too high a price to pay for several weeks of bedroom gymnastics with a younger man. But in the end, she couldn't bring herself to two-time her bank account. She handed back the jar and said, "Oh, well, what else do you have?" I went back to the hutch, rummaged around, and produced another green jar. "Here, try this," I suggested. "Bloodroot, Sanguina canadensis. It's a member of the poppy family. The Native Americans used bloodroot to stain their bodies before they went out scalping people, and they still use it today as a dye. Mrs. Teitelbaum sniffed at this jar, too, and wrinkled up her nose. Musty, she decided. Ah, yes, but heap plenty powerful. If you keep bloodroot in your purse, Mrs. Teitelbaum, you will never lose your money, ever. You can use it to protect your home, too, simply by nailing a small piece of it under your windowsill. I promise you, if you take bloodroot home with you tonight, your weekend will be totally different. No lost purse, no falling picture, no flooded carpets, no stolen pearls. Everything that came up in the cards will be canceled. Canceled? You're sure? Well, they don't call me the incredible Erskine, herbal visionary, for nothing. I see, I interpret, I fix. I can heal the future before it happens. So how much for the bloodroot? I sucked in my breath. It's pretty hard to get a hold of these days, Mrs. T. Most Sanguina canadense have been wiped out by genetically modified sarsaparilla, but I guess I could let you have a couple of inches for $6.50. Mrs. Teitelbaum opened her purse, took out a money clip that looked like a raccoon trap, and tugged out a $10 bill. Can you break this for me? I didn't allow myself to waver. When it comes to extracting money out of wealthy old women, wavering is fatal. Wealthy old women have gotten wealthy by being totally unscrupulous, by marrying bald, rich old men for lucre, not for love, by tactical divorcing and equally tactical remarrying, and they will screw you for the price of a day-old newspaper if you show the slightest hesitation. They're vampires, and the only way to get the better of them is to hammer a stake through their checkbooks. Actually, it's $650, I told her. Then I let out my famous high-pitched laugh, as if she had just played an incredibly funny practical joke on me. You knew all along that it was $650, you wicked, wicked woman. You were pulling my leg, weren't you? What a rib tickler you are. She tugged out 6 $100 bills, one at a time, and then 5 tens. This was where not wavering came into it. What was she going to say? That she had really expected me to sell her a whole 2 inches of rare Apache bloodroot for $6.50? I mean, how stupid would that have made her look? I took her money with that special sleight of hand they teach you at magician's school, so that the mark is barely aware that it's gone. Money, whoop, no money. Then I leaned forward and said very confidentially, "You promise you won't tell anyone how much I charged you, will you?" She looked up at me, not quite understanding what I meant. "That's a very special price," I explained. "I wouldn't sell bloodroot to anybody else for that kind of money." I let out another scream of laughter, and this time Mrs. Teitelbaum laughed too. As I opened the door of my apartment, however, she hesitated. "Mr. Erskine," she said. I thought for a split second that she was going to say, "Give me back my $650, you double-dealing 2-bit chiseler." But instead she whispered, "That other herb, the first one you offered me, the spikenard? That's it, the spikenard. I was wondering, so long as the bloodroot can guarantee to keep my money safe." "Oh, you were wondering if the spikenard could keep it doubly safe." "Well, yes, kind of extra security, if you know what I mean." "In spite of the side effect?" "Mr. Erskine, I haven't had a side effect since Mr. Teitelbaum passed over." I don't know, Mrs. Teitelbaum. You're sure you can handle it? Some of my ladies have complained of getting very tired. I'm in the best of health, Mr. Erskine. I eat only fish, well, sometimes a little chicken, and maybe a cream strudel now and again, but I do Pilates and I walk 10,000 paces a day, every day, and always in a different direction. Well, okay, so long as you don't hold me liable for any, overexertion. Mr. Erskine, Mrs. Teitelbaum protested, all flushed and coquettish. And she hadn't even bought any spikenard yet, let alone found herself an eager young lover with a very large resume. I opened up the cabinet, took out the green glass jar, and gave her 3 leaves of spikenard. Under your pillow, Mrs. Teitelbaum, in a pure white linen bag. That'll do the trick. She tugged $300 bills from her money clip and held them out to me. But just as I was reaching forward to whoop them out of her fingers, she snatched hold of my wrist and held it tight. There's just one more thing. What? I thought. She's wearing a wire and I'm under arrest? You didn't give me my mystic motto, she said reprovingly. Oh, yes, your mystic motto. How could I forget? Shoot, I thought. I used to own a rare 19th century copy of Bultitude's Compendium of Astrological Admonitions, but I must have dropped it on the street when I had to move out of our apartment on East 86th Street. I'll bet some wino found it, and even now he's terrified of sitting cross-legged under a medlar tree on the 8th of August, or seeing 2 gray cats through the rungs of a ladder. But the real nuisance is that these days I have to invent my own mystic mottos. Let's see. If you stand under a lemon tree for long enough, the falling blossom will turn you into a bride. Mr. Erskine! I swear to God there were tears in Mrs. Teitelbaum's eyes. I gently eased the $100 bills from between her fingers, 1, 2, 3, smiling all the time. Goodbye, I said, ushering her toward the door. Next week, same time? There's just one more thing, she told me. Yes, I asked, sweeter than ever. You forgot to give me my $50 change. But that was another day's consultations over. I went to the window and dragged back the drapes in the faint hope that the bosomy young Hispanic woman with the stroller was still out there, but of course she wasn't. Anyhow, think about it. She was probably hopelessly devoted to the father of her child, who was built like The Rock and worked as a bodyguard for some famous Cuban guaracha band, and who would rip the arms off any man who came within breathing distance of her, especially a 43-year-old mystic in a green cape made of stretched nylon couch cover and a golden skull cap that was actually a Mickey Mouse hat with the ears unstapled. I went through to my tiny kitchen, opened the icebox, and took out a bottle of Guinness. It's an acquired taste, Guinness, like burnt toast, only beer. But it's good for a man living on his own because it's food and drink in the same bottle, and you never have any dishes to wash. I took a long swallow, burped, and then I went back into the living area to tidy up my fortune-telling cards. How are the mystic fallen, I thought. Up until 13 months ago, I had been living with Karen and Lucy in faded grandeur up on East 86th Street. Now here I was in this dingy little 2-room apartment over Khalid's Pakistani provisions in a run-down district that I like to call Upper Greenwich Village. I hadn't even unpacked properly yet, although I had managed to buy 9 mismatched bookshelves and stock the walls with all my tatty old volumes of magic and fortune-telling and demonic arts. I had covered my table with a crimson candlewick bedspread and set out my crystal ball, and I regularly burned sandalwood incense to cover the smell of dry rot and Indian cooking from downstairs. What can you say? Life's a bitch, and then you smell of fenugreek. I don't really know how or why our marriage came apart. I guess it was mostly my fault. I'm never truly fulfilled unless I'm desperate. Like the painter Edward Munch of the Scream fame once said, "Without anxiety, I would have been a ship without a rudder." There was nobody else involved, even that smug tangerine-tanned bastard, Rodney Elwick III, who kept inviting himself around for large glasses of chilled Sauvignon whenever he felt like it, and laughing with Karen in the kitchen while I was playing drafts with Lucy. "Something funny?" I used to say, appearing in the kitchen door, and they both used to look at me as if I had a booger hanging out of my nostrils. I was an outsider. I wasn't even new money. I was no money at all, of any age. All the money was Karen's. But Rodney Elwick III wasn't totally to blame. I was jealous, yes, but I have to admit that I was also bored and discontented and kicking my heels. I felt that my life was being wastefully torn away day by day, like the blank pages from somebody else's diary. I had discovered the terrible truth that happiness isn't everything. To know that we're alive, we need challenges, and we need problems, and most of all, we need worry. So here I was, the incredible Erskine, herbal visionary, with all the worry that anybody could wish for, and absolutely no money, but alive. A blonde woman in a turquoise blouse appeared in the entrance to the antique store on the opposite side of the street and stood there, smoking. She had dark roots in her hair, and her stomach bulged over her denim miniskirt, but she had a hair-raisingly pretty face, like an angel out of a Florentine painting. I wondered what would happen if I went across and introduced myself. "I've been watching you, my dear, and I think you're beautiful, in a strange, trashy way." No, that wouldn't work, and I was still trying to work out something more seductive to say to her when my doorbell rang. My doorbell made a wonderful glissando noise like a xylophone, and it had cost me only $7.88 in Wolfowitz Discount Electrics on 2nd Avenue. I opened the door. A young man of about 25 was standing outside in the corridor, blinking. He had messy blonde hair, and he was dressed in a white t-shirt with molten iris printed on it in red, and jeans. He was snub-nosed, very pale, with pale green eyes and blonde eyebrows, and he had a 9-carat gold crucifix dangling in his left ear. I could tell by the yellow on his fingers that he smoked, but he was only wearing one ring, and that was a heavy silver skull. You notice details like these when you're a fortune teller. One of the most interesting details about him, though, was that he was here at all. Young men don't consult clairvoyance, not as a rule. 90% of my clientele was female, and the few men who did come had either been diagnosed with a terminal illness and wanted to know how long they had left, or were interested to know in advance which horse was going to win at Aqueduct. "Can I help you?" I asked him. He frowned at the folded-up paper napkin that he was holding in his hand. "Are you, the incredible Erskine?" "Incredible as it might seem, yes." "My sister said maybe I should come talk to you." "Your sister?" "Marilyn Bush. I'm Ted Bush." "Do I know your sister?" "Well, I don't think so, but she's friends with a girl who's the niece of a friend of yours. She said I should talk to this friend of yours, but this friend of yours said she didn't do psychic stuff no more, but you did, so maybe I should come see you." "What's that again?" In Earth speak this time? Well, I keep getting this nightmare, okay? So my sister's friend said I should talk to her Aunt Amelia. Aunt Amelia? I don't know any Aunt Amelias. I don't know any Aunt anythings. I mean, look at me. Do I look like a nephew? Amelia Crusoe? She's called Amelia Carlson now, but that's the name my sister told me to tell you. Amelia Crusoe? I used to love Amelia Crusoe. I still loved Amelia Crusoe. Amelia was a real psychic, a real medium, who could talk to dead people as easily as you and I can talk to people on the bus. She had always talked about giving up the seance business, and she had, more than once, but I always knew that she could no more give up talking to the dead than I could give up worry. She needed it to remind herself that she was still alive. I said, "You'd better come in. You want a Guinness? It's Irish. You drink enough of it, you pea green." "I'm cool, thanks." "Sit down," I told him, dragging out a bentwood chair. "What did you say your name was? Fred?" "Ted. Ted Bush. That's Bush, like an Anheuser-Busch." "Okay, Ted," I said, adjusting my golden skull cap. "I think the best thing I can do is read your fortune in the cards and see if this nightmare of yours is going to have a bad effect on your life, or whether it's just a harmless nocturnal terror." Ted nodded. "I understand." I was glad about that because I didn't. "I'll have to charge you a fee," I told him. "My rates are very reasonable. I'm not one of those Upper West Side celebrity mystics with a self-help book on the New York Times bestseller lists and a gold Lexus in the garage. But peering into the unknown, it's a very complicated business, and it takes years of dedication to perfect. So I have to ask my clients for the nominal sum of $55, inclusive of tax." Ted opened up his left hand, and there was a $100 bill neatly folded. "Amelia said that I'd have to pay you, but she didn't know how much." Terrific, I thought. I should have asked for $100, but I took the money and gave Ted $45 change, including $5 in nickels and dimes, which I shook out of my jelly jar. "So tell me about this nightmare," I asked him, as I reopened the deck of fortune-telling cards and started to lay them out. Don't I have to tap the deck or nothing?" "Where do you think we are, Reno?" "No, you don't have to tap the deck. They know you already, these cards. Look at this top one, a young man with messy hair climbing up a flight of stairs. They even predicted that you were coming to see me." "Hey," Ted looked impressed. "This is the Jeu Noir," I told him, "the black game, the most accurate fortune-telling cards you can buy, if you can ever find them. They're banned in most countries, and do you know why? People were using them to predict the date of their own death, and then killing people they didn't like on the day before, since they were due to die anyhow, so they wouldn't get executed for it." "Really?" "Sure. Look at these cards. Exquisite, aren't they? Look at the detail. Do you know who designed them? French prisoners of war in England in Napoleonic times. The artists weren't allowed to have pens, so they cut all the flesh off the tips of their fingers and drew the designs with their own sharpened bones, dipped in a mixture of boot polish and rat's blood." Ted peered across the table with what he obviously thought was a knowledgeable frown. I doubt if he had heard of Napoleon Solo, let alone Napoleon Bonaparte. He sniffed and said, "I have the same nightmare just about every night. I feel like I've been sleeping, okay? And then I suddenly wake up." "But in reality, you're still asleep?" "That's right. It's pitch dark, and when I try to sit up, I can't. I'm trapped inside this wooden box, like a coffin." "Carry on." I kept on laying out the Jeu Noir cards in rows of 7, 6, 5, 3, and 4. I'm pounding on the lid with my fists, but it's fastened real tight and I can't budge it, and in some way I know that there's another box on top of me with somebody in it too, and another box on top of that with somebody in that one too. I glanced up at him. He was clutching himself like he had the stomach ache, and there were clear beads of perspiration on his upper lip. It was a sweltering day, granted, but my ratty old air conditioner didn't work too bad. "So you're feeling very claustrophobic?" I asked him. "I'm suffocating, man. I'm banging, but I know that nobody's going to answer me, and nobody's going to let me out." "Is that it? You bang on the lid and nobody lets you out? And then what?" Ted said. "This box I'm in, I think it's on a ship. It's going up and down like a fairground ride, and after a while I start to feel like I'm going to barf. I can hear the ocean and the wind and the clanking noises. I can hear somebody calling out in this really high voice. Maybe it's a girl, but it sounds more like a very young boy." I put down the second to last card. "Can you catch what he's saying?" "Not really. It doesn't make any sense. I'll tell you what it reminds me of, though. The Supers kids, when my family lived on 24th Street. I hear this voice, and it sounds just like one of them." "So you hear the voice calling, and that's when you wake up?" "Well, I wish. Nothing else happens, but I still don't wake up. Sometimes the nightmare seems to go on and on for hours, with the ship heaving up and down, and the kid calling out, and I can't do nothing at all but lie there, and I'm gasping for air." I looked at him narrowly. "Is there anything happening in your life right now to make you feel trapped? Are you stuck in a job you don't like? Maybe you've just gotten engaged?" "Not at all, man. Everything was totally cool before I started having these nightmares. I got myself a new job at the beginning of last month at Lasky's camera store, and a new place to live, and I'm gigging in the evenings at the Gothica Club. I don't have a care in the world, man, apart from these nightmares." "All right then," I told him. "I've laid out the 28 predictor cards so that we can see what your immediate future is going to be. The last card we don't turn over till the very end." "You can really read these things?" "You think I'd have the nerve to charge you $55 if I couldn't?" "Okay," said Ted dubiously. I pointed to the first card, the sweetheart. "Well, this is a good start. You're going to meet a new girl this weekend. She's sitting on the bed, see? And she's smiling flirtatiously, and that definitely means romance, even if it's only a one-night stand." "Yeah? Then who's that looking in the window?" I jerked up my head in alarm, but we were 3 stories up, and of course there was nobody. "Man, you scared me." "I meant there in the card," said Ted, pointing at it. "The girl's sitting on the bed, but there's somebody like spying on her." "Really?" He was right. I had never noticed it before, but right in the corner of the card there was a window, and a parchment-colored face was peering into it. A mask, rather than a face, with a slit for a mouth and 2 slitty eyes. Talk about Leatherface in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. "That face, that's your conscience," I improvised. "When you take the girl to bed, your conscience is going to be watching you and saying, 'Excuse me, Ted, are you doing the honorable thing here? Or are you merely playing with this young woman's affections? See here, beside the bed, there's a chessboard with all the pieces knocked over. That's a symbol of the fickle game of love.' That conscience dude, he's pretty scary looking." "Well, your conscience is supposed to be scary. He's supposed to make you think twice." Man, if I saw that dude staring into my bedroom window, I wouldn't have to think twice. I'd run for the door. Let's take the next card then. This is you talking to all of your friends. It may not look exactly like you. I mean, you don't have red hair and bright green pants, but it represents you. You're smiling. You're relaxed. That's good news. Ted picked up the card and scrutinized it for nearly half a minute. He was obviously determined to get his $55 worth. So who's this? He wanted to know, turning the card around so that I could look at it too. Who's who? This dude way off in the distance, all dressed in black, with a tall black hat, and his face all wrapped up in a scarf. Oh, him. He's not especially significant. We should go on to the third card. No, hold up, man. Here's all these people laughing and joking, okay? But this guy right at the back, he's looking toward this guy dressed in black, and he's definitely scared. He's not laughing and joking like the rest of them, is he? He's got his mouth wide open like he's definitely scared. I took the card reluctantly and examined it myself. Well, I guess you're right. He does look a little concerned. So why is he concerned? You don't really want to know that. I do, actually. Like, if this is my future and somebody's looking scared, I really want to know why. All right, I said. This black figure appears on only 7 cards in the jeu noir, at various distances from the main protagonists. Sometimes he's far away, sometimes he's practically breathing down their necks, but what his appearance actually means, that's open to a very wide interpretation. But who is he? That's all I'm asking. He's, imminent death. Thank you for listening to this week's episode, and I hope you'll join us next week for the next installment of Manitou Blood by Graham Masterton. And until then, have a great week, everyone.